Welcome to Doing the Dirty Dishes podcast. My name is Stephen Quigley and I'm your host. This is my first podcast after a few years of contemplation, lots of discussions with different friends that I respect, their opinions, their backgrounds, and that's a story for another time. But I decided to start a podcast. And I decided to tie it together with my spiritual blog, which I took a short time off when I was traveling the world, the last 14 months. And the spiritual blog is basically just as this will be. It's conversation, topics, subjects that are spiritual of nature, or within a spiritual context, that brighten your day, expand your mind, or enlighten your soul. Things that make you think, things that make you feel good. So this is my first podcast, my first episode. So please bear with me. Never been on camera before. And don't know much about cameras, microphones, lighting, or anything. So reminds me of Seth Meyers the other night, watching him on TV when he's doing a recording at home. And he says, this is how I look, you know. And it's interesting now to see all these other people that are famous, that are used to having professional studios and makeup artists and lighting everywhere, to be acting normal now on camera, just like I do, or I'm doing now. At some point, if people like me and I have budget, then I can get production and better editing. But for now, I hope you like it. This is a story, and I picked it because it's special to my heart. Same reason I picked it as my first blog, and it's I titled it Synchronicity of the Universe, Pairing Me with Per, Reykjavik to Philadelphia. And let me first say that in my travels, which have been extensive, living and traveling throughout the world, after becoming spiritual, I was always aware, almost always, of why I was going to the place that I was going. You know, why was I going to that country? What was I doing there? What was the purpose? And if I didn't know it, usually soon after, I would discover it. So in this instance, I had been in Scandinavia, and I had flown to Stockholm with a stopover in Reykjavik, Iceland, the famous stopover from Icelandair, which is really a bit of a bait and switch, because it's not really a stopover. They actually charge you for two different flights, but that's another subject for another time, and I might say a few things on it later in this podcast. But in this situation, I didn't know why I was going to Iceland, and I did know one reason, but I knew that wasn't the main reason. And I was meeting an old friend there, Sunita. And quick background story of Sunita is I lived in Tokyo in the 1990s, in the late 90s, and I had met, when I was traveling in Greece, when I was living in the Middle East, a Japanese guy named Toru, and he lived in Tokyo, and he was my best friend when I lived in Tokyo. We went to the Olympics together, we did everything together, and he had a good friend who was Nepalese, and he was a man, ended up marrying a Nepalese woman. And after the wedding, we went to a reception in Tokyo, and there, working at the reception, was a beautiful young girl named Sunita, who was from Kathmandu, Nepal. And she had befriended me, and through conversation asked me if I might help her with culture and her adjustment to America, since she wanted to go to America one day. That was her hope and her dream. And needless to say, I hadn't spoken to her for so many years, and she did make it to America. She's now a spectacular nurse in Massachusetts, in the Boston area, and has an amazing life, and I couldn't be happier for her. She's married, and she has a beautiful daughter, Hazel, and a great husband, and she does good in the world, and so I'm happy to have her as a friend. And so she decided to meet me in Iceland, where I could also sign a copy of my book that she had for me to sign, and And we had a great 5 days together. It was spectacular. And that will be another trip or episode that I'll speak about that with. But Iceland is absolutely magical. It's out of this world. It really is. It's one of a kind. It's got supernatural beauty at every turn. And I had a special 5 days together with Sunita there. So thank you for that. At the end of the trip, 1 week layover with Sunita, I had to fly back to Philadelphia from Reykjavik, Iceland. So they had a deal, and so I upgraded my flight to the front of the plane, which I wouldn't normally do because I like to be economical and pragmatic with my my expenses and income. But if the option is there for the comfortability of me with travel, I do it. So needless to say, I got to the airport early. In my older age, I'm a bit smarter. I don't rush. I used to really rush. Make it by the skin of my teeth. Only missed one flight though. And that was when I wasn't even a professional. That was when I was 18 in Toronto, coming back from a camping trip in Temagami. So I was there early. Sorry, I get these bit nervous here. So I was there early, and I had a cup of tea, and then I got to the gate, and they didn't have any way of loading me to get me onto the plane. So they loaded everyone onto the plane first, and I only had to go 3 meters to get to the first seat. I had the first seat, and there was a young, skinny Polish guy there. And earlier in the trip, when I got to the airport, instead of taking an extremely expensive taxi one way from the airport to my hotel in Reykjavik, I took the bus, and on that bus they didn't have any way of getting me on, so a skinny Polish guy had to carry me onto the bus, put me down in the front seat. Well, in this situation, it was a skinny Polish guy that was there working at the airport, and I said, you can lift me if you want and carry me on. It's very easy. I have to just go 3 meters. So he did, and he carried me on. It was very nice. I was very thankful for that. So there I sat on the plane, and to my right is just one gentleman. To my left, there weren't anyone. And they did come eventually, the other people, so it was a full plane. So in any case, it's in the front of the plane, and they give you champagne. They come out, and so I have a glass of champagne. Cheers to the guy next to me. A couple of minutes goes by, and hi, I'm Stephen. Hi, Pierre. Oh, okay, nice to meet you, Pierre. Here, I think I got a French guy next to me. Perfect. Should be interesting conversation for the flight home. And a few minutes later, the stewardess comes by and she asks, would you like a wine? We have Spanish wine, Italian wine, whatever. So we said we'll have Spanish wine. And we have a glass and we share it and we cheers. And he starts talking with me. And 15 minutes goes by and I can barely understand anything that he's saying. Still thinking, of course, that he's Pierre and he's French. And somewhere in the middle of this kind of crazy conversation, I hear Slovakia. So I say, Bratislava, and he says, yeah. So I think, okay, now I know where he's from. He's Slovakian. Well, I know a couple words in Slovakian, a little bit of Slovakian, so I say, ako sa máš, dobre? And he looks at me like I have 3 eyes. Okay. So now I'm more lost. Who is this guy? Where is he from? What's he saying? What's his story? What is he telling me? And then his English starts to break down and get a little bit easier. And after some time, he takes out a presentation that he has. But before he does that, I've now surmised from the conversation and understanding him as he speaks further that he is actually Danish. And his name is Per, P-E-R, kind of like the pear you eat, or like the title, Pairing Me Together with Per. And as it turns out, he had an accident when he was a younger boy in Slovakia. And he got injured, he was paralyzed. And over the next 20 years, he taught himself how to walk again. And he had figured out through study and through examination of his body and going deep, the connections between the body and the brainstem and how they reconnect to the nerves and the neural pathways and how you get the muscles and everything to come together again. And that's the system that he's starting to explain to me. And I'm just amazed at every level, thinking this is just too good to be true. This is ungodly. This is strange. Something is, and it didn't click to me yet. The synchronicity. It didn't click to me yet that was the reason that I was on that flight, was to meet him, so he could tell me about the system that he developed, because I was trying to walk again, and this system was going to help me. And he could see much further ahead than I knew. The conversation had revealed it to that point. So it was very kind of surreal in a sense. And as time goes by, he eventually hands me a copy of the presentation. And he says, take a look at it. And he starts explaining it to me. And he's explaining it to me in English, but poor English. Some words were advanced from the medical side. And some words, the accent was just so deep. And it's strange because I'm good with language and good with accents. I spend most days speaking with people from other countries. And I had lots of time living in them and around other accents with friends and whatnot. But I couldn't get much of what he was telling me. I started to feel bad, so I started to point and kind of like Trump, there were photos and it was a presentation from PowerPoint, so it was easy to start to grasp. And as I started to grasp it, I started to really understand how deep this was and what it really meant. So, the flight wasn't too long. It was a daytime flight, and another bottle of wine later, we're laughing, and I'm amazed, and we start to talk about other things, Denmark and Europe and, different things. He's a very learned man, Per. Very interesting, very intriguing, so even better. And I get to learn that he has a son named Jack, who he loves very dearly, because he speaks of him with immense love. To me, and in describing him, he's a college player, a local college basketball player, a budding star, college player at a local school, and which is not far from me. So I told Per, hey, listen, when we get back, I have an Uber driver, a guy that I know that he takes me back and forth to the airport when I travel. If you want, you can just hop in with me, and it would be helpful anyway, because with my bag if I need it. So he agreed to take the ride with me. We get out of the airport. Malik, my Pakistani friend, the driver from Uber comes and picks me up. And we get in the taxi and we're chatting, and we're tired. Had some wine, so we're feeling good. And he says, well, hey, listen, you're not far from my hotel. Why don't I come by your home and examine you and teach you some things about the system? I said, okay, sure. Now, granted, he'd already given me a copy of his presentation that he gave in England to this group of doctors, which he said pretty much were either stunned or thought it was quack medicine, which I can understand. He does face a lot of suppression in his country in Europe for this system that helps, it heals people, which is not surprising. So that he would be willing to come over. So I said, sure. And then he said, well, I'll come over in 3 days. And I said, okay, sure. So that night I tried sending him a message on WhatsApp and it didn't go through. I tried calling his phone internationally, it didn't go through. I tried his email and I couldn't get through. I tried his hotel, they didn't have a record of him. And I'm usually very good with these things. So I thought, wow, that's interesting. So I went to his website in Danish, in Denmark, and I wrote in a message. It ended up getting to his wife. His wife ended up passing it to him. And then he knew that I had confirmed the meeting. So a couple of days later, he shows up at my back door and rings me and says, I'm here. Okay, perfect. He comes in. I'm a big tea drinker. He's a big tea drinker. He says, let's sit, let's have a chat, let's have tea. perfect. I love tea. So we sit for a half hour, 40 minutes. We sit and we talk. Very loving conversation. We talk about everything under the sun. And then he says, let me examine you. Do you mind? I said, no. So he sits me down on the couch and he takes my shoes off. He looks at this and touches his nose and puts my toe here, puts this here. Not a very long examination. And he says, the good news is you're going to walk. I already thought that in my mind. But now it was clicking that this maybe is the link. This is the synchronicity of the universe bringing that link to me that I need. I didn't know that I was missing a link, but I didn't know how I was going to get there. So it kind of clicked. It made perfect sense. And then he says, okay, well, listen, I got to run off. Jack has practice. And, I'll come back on Saturday morning at noon and I'll teach you the system. I said, okay, fine. And then I didn't hear from him again. And then that morning, I get a text when I'm in bed from Malik saying, hey, Perry asked me to pick him up and bring you over at noon. Is that okay? I said, sure, fine. And he brought him over, excuse me, at noon. Sorry, I had to have some water. So he said, I'll be back at noon. So anyway, a couple of days later, here he shows up again at my door. Hey, Stephen. Jolly as he always is, big smile, lots of love. You can feel the love radiating from his heart. You can just see he's a man of love, of compassion, of care, of healing. He's just he's a man that has a gift, and obviously it's a gift that comes from above. Knowledge comes from books and smarts. Comes from conversation and other means, but true intelligence comes from above, and it's given to us. It's endowed upon us. It's grace upon us, and that's what he has, and it's a gift that he should share with the world, and he is sharing it with the world. And he was kind enough to give me a copy of the actual program, these keys to how it works, to the actual system. And I could take that and I could go and I could do lots of things with it. Of course I never would, but it's just telling of the love in his heart, that he trusts me also, that he was willing to give me a copy on the airplane of this study, of his presentation, everything. So there he is, he comes over and he teaches me the system. It takes a few times and I get it. And then he's off. And that's it, he's off. And he says, excuse me. He says, clearing my throat can be a bit tough sometimes. Even a tiny cough can sound like I'm dying. So it's just part of my recovery. And he says, good luck with this system. I'll visit you again when I come back to see Jack. And off he goes. And then for the next few hours, I sat there quietly in my home, which is very peaceful. Lots of art, and I burn incense. It's got great energy. And I sat there for the next few hours and just thought about the immense gift that I had just received from the universe, that I had just received from Per. And I was touched. And I was touched in ways that I didn't know. And later I would go on to write my spiritual blog. And that was basically that he touched my heart and my left butt cheek responded. And that story is basically that after a number of months of using his system, while in the shower, unable normally to lift my left butt cheek while sitting on a stool when I shower, I was never able to do it. And it might not seem like a big deal, but then I was able to do it, and that was as a result of my muscles and my nerves connecting, and basically his system. And to this date, I continue to heal, I continue to get better, and it's just a matter of time before I walk. And I owe a huge debt of love and gratitude to Per, and I dedicated my first blog to Per, and now I'm dedicating my first podcast, YouTube episode, to Per. So thank you for your love, thank you for your care, thank you for your compassion, and thank you to the universe for the synchronicity of bringing us together. Immense. And I'm going to leave on a quote which is something that I love. I also have a website that is filled with the same proverbial wisdom. Of course, it's doing the dirty dishes. It's on Facebook. And if you like it, you can go and see it. And if you like this video, you can decide to share it. But the quote is from Carl Jung, one of my favorite psychologists. And it's, "What I found were coincidences which were connected so meaningfully that their chance concurrence would represent a degree of improbability that would have to be expressed by an astronomical figure." Put another way, also by Jung, synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence of two or more events where something other than the probability of chance is involved. Carl Jung. Well, Carl said it best. Universe brought Per and I together on this plane ride. Didn't know why, and then I discovered it, and what a gift it was. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you for listening to my first podcast. Thank you for giving me your time, allowing me to enter into your heart and your mind and your soul. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider sharing it. And eternal love and light, especially at a time right now that we're facing in this world with the COVID-19 pandemic. So love and light to all those affected by this global and economic catastrophic crisis that we're experiencing right now before our eyes. So and love and light, especially to those on the front lines, the first responders, the delivery people, the truck drivers, the train drivers, everyone that's continuing to help us stay healthy through medicine, through doctors, through delivery, through food, through the fruits, the supermarkets. So thank you to all of those people.